Do you want to make your own VTuber model but don't know where to start? That's okay. I'm gonna help you. So, the first thing that you do when making a model is obviously drawing it. But how exactly do you do that? Since everything has to be on the right layers, and that whole concept of having everything on separate layers is super overwhelming at first, and it was for me too. So I want to go over a model that I'm working on currently and kind of use that as an example to show you what I personally find the best way to layer or what has worked best for me. Talk about some methods and techniques that I find easiest to use. So this is the model that I'm currently working on. I've only finished the head so far. And I first want to talk about some different techniques that you could do for cutting it apart and getting all the layers separate. So, what I see most people do, and what I personally like doing, is you have your sketch, which is mine right here, and you just start drawing everything on top of it and already separate everything correctly as you're drawing. While other people, for example, just draw everything on one layer or the amount that they're used to because they're an artist and that's easier for them to make everything look right because things can easily look a little weird, especially when you're doing this for like the first time. And they just finish the drawing on the layers that they're used to and then later on cut everything out and separate it onto their own layers. You usually do that when you're like about 80% done, cut it out, and then finish rendering that part. Personally, I use kind of an in between thing because I use the symmetry tool. So I draw everything on separate layers. For example, my ears. I have the top part already separated from the floof and the back, but I still have my lefts and rights on one layer because I use the symmetry tool. So I'm just later on when I finish everything, I'm gonna separate all of them into left and rights. That is what I figured worked best for me. And I just think that's the simplest method, even though it can be hard getting the art to look right when separating all the layers. But I'm gonna talk about that still. So one of the biggest problems that I have noticed for me was the overlapping. For example, if you have the hair, when you remove this part, the part underneath it still has to look correct because later when your hair is going to be moving around, you might end up having wait, this is a bad layer to show that on because when this one for example sways left and right, you will like see parts that usually are not seen when you look at it from the front. So you always have to think about what does it look like underneath, and you can't just leave parts empty because if this one was to sway this way now, you would suddenly see like parts down here, and if they weren't finished rendering, there'd just be I don't know a shadow that just suddenly ends, for example, and you don't want that. So I usually what I do is let's take this layer as an example, the hair at the very bottom. I'm gonna look at it like this, and I'm gonna finish drawing just this part down here. And then I remove the layers on top and finish the rest of it so it looks coherent and looks like one piece, but still looks correct even with all the other layers on top. I figured that worked best, and it's honestly pretty simple and it doesn't take that long. Another thing that I had a problem with in one of my like very first models is that when let me take like a part of the banks when you move this, that there's just if the top part moves that there's just a bald spot. Um I haven't done this here yet, but I usually just take the color that you have at the very top of the head and create kind of like a safety net layer underneath that just has that hair color, like a buzz cut under the hair, so that when it moves and sways, it's not gonna be bald. It's a pretty lazy solution, but to me, that has usually worked. So for the ears, you want to render them fully as well because when your character turns to the side, you're gonna see way more of the ear. Like, just gonna draw this on this very top layer right now. She was to move her head more to this side. This strand here in front would be more like here, and you'll be able to see like an ear here. Um, right now you don't, but that would be the case. Not for her, but maybe for your model, right? So whenever you draw something, think about what it would look like from the side, or if she turned her head a certain way. There's certain things that you can do, for example, with that. Let's say your character has a tattoo. I would still draw the entire tattoo and then just clip it to the skin. So you only see the part that you see, but when, for example, on the side of the neck, and then when they turn their head, you can move that clip layer more. So it actually looks like the neck is turning, because if you only have the part of the tattoo that you already see from the front, it's just gonna end up looking weird. So that is something you always want to consider. Um, so then the eyes. I already have my eyes separated into left and right. Actually, for the eyes, I honestly, the only advice I really have here is that everything that you want to move on its own should be on its own layer, which is why I have like every single highlight and like every small dot in these eyes on their own layers, because I like to add jiggle physics to them because I like the look of that. So that is something you always want to have in the back of your mind. If you want to have something move on its own, make it its own layer, even if it's like the smallest thing. What else do I have for the nose? I usually only have the shadow as well as the line. It's pretty simple, but I like it that way because I can still give it a 3D look when the character turns to the side. What you could do to emphasize that even more is make the line longer and cover it up with the skin color, so that when your character turns to the side, you can move that color, skin color part up, so it looks like you get to see more of the nose bridge. I actually like that effect, but I personally think it looks better on male models than on female ones. That is just my personal opinion, of course, but that's a nice touch that you could add if you wanted to. For the mouth, I separate everything. I duplicate the lines, so my top line for the lip as well as the bottom line are the exact same, but you need to, because when you open your mouth, obviously you just end up having one line if you didn't do that. So that is that. You can put the line and the skin that covers the inside of the mouth on one layer, or you can just glue them together later on in Live2D. That really doesn't matter that much. I personally prefer keeping them separated, but it works perfectly fine if you don't. Then I have a tongue out toggle. That one, you can do that. You don't have to. I just like doing that. Um, for the inside of the mouth, let me just remove all of these. For the inside of the mouth, you're gonna have the teeth as well as the bottom teeth. For the bottom row of teeth, you could add the back teeth on their separate layers, also separating left and right, um, just to add more depth into it, especially when you're turning sides. You can move them around so it actually looks like you're looking into the mouth, and the mouth is actually affected by how you turn. Additionally, for more depth, you could also add another darker circle in the back of the mouth instead of just one color, like a gradient. That works really well. I've done that on other models I've done. Um, but I honestly, I was being kind of lazy. Uh, for the face, which I think is a really important part actually, because I've had a lot of difficulties figuring this one out and how I want to do that. I personally like keeping the face line separated from the base color, because when you make the character look up, I haven't done it for this one, but when you look up, you can make that line disappear, creating more of a 3D effect that you're actually looking up. Um, I have the dots as well as the blush separated, so when you turn to the side, it doesn't look like the perspective is off because it's a lot easier to work with it if it's not directly on the base color of the face. Then for the shadow, which I think is a pretty important part, I can actually show that. Let me unclip it. It overlaps, so it's longer than the face actually is, but I clip it to the base of it. So I can move it around like this. For example, when the character looks aside, you can move it here, the other side there, or when she looks up or down, you can move it based off of where she's looking, and that makes it look more 3D. You could actually take that effect on another level by completely filling it out as well as the line. So you'd have um this could be like the line, and then you took the color of your shadow like this, filling all of these actually up and not just making them a line. And this one, and what you can do with that is that you can take just this part and move it around like this in it, so it looks more 3D and it has more depth instead of just that one line. If you really want to bring that effect out, if you really want to emphasize that. Otherwise, honestly, just being able to move the shadow like this is more than enough, in my opinion. Um, that is pretty much everything I have to say to the face. Obviously, you could say that the neck is part of the face or the head, but I prefer covering the neck in the body because I struggled a lot with properly attaching it to the shoulders. It would always look weird when I started out first. But I think that's everything I wanted to cover. So basically, all that you have to consider is what it's gonna look like when you um, move to the sides, look up and down, the 3D effect that you want to achieve, and your rigging and what your rigging is going to look like and how good the rigging is going to be is really dependent on how you layered it before. That was pretty much all I had to say on the topic. I hope I was able to help and that you have more of an idea on how to layer your VTuber model now. If there are any more questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I'm going to reply to them all. And I hope you have a nice day.